Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Three's In. Bobo here. 18 December 2024. How appropriate for this presentation. 52 years ago, on 18 December 1972, we began a campaign that was known as Linebacker 2. From the 18th of December 1972 for the next 11 days, we sent B-52s up north to the cities of Haiphong and Hanoi to discuss peace talks with the North Vietnamese in the only language they seemed to understand at the time. Iron bombs falling on their tiny little pointy heads. And we were very successful with that endeavor. At any rate, each year at this time, I take pause to read this book. The 11 Days of Christmas by Marshall L. Michael III. It's a great book that discusses Linebacker 2, and I really enjoy it. And each year it gives me an even deeper appreciation for the air crew and the support crew and the ground crew and so forth that helped these men pull off this mission. So this morning I woke up about 3:30, I don't know why, just wake up. And I began thinking of this presentation, and I have a classmate of mine from pilot training, a fellow named Jeff Stark. And Jeff flew on one of these bombers that first night, I think very early on, the second or the third wave, as he shared with me. And he gave me some insight into what it was like, first-hand insight, if you will. He said his job as a co-pilot was to ensure that the airplane stayed within 5 knots, plus or minus 5 knots, of the airspeed that they had to hold in order for the bombs to hit on target. And he said that's all his responsibility was managing those 8 throttles. He said, oh, by the way, I had a secondary duty. He says, I also had to look out the window for SAMs coming up at us. He said, if the SAM was moving across the windscreen, it probably wasn't a big deal. But he said, if it stayed stationary, he said there was a good chance it was going to hit you. And he said a couple times during this conversation, he said, Bob, it was really scary. And I can only imagine. I can just imagine what it was like. I wasn't there, of course, but I can just imagine. But he said he was busy watching the airspeed, and then he would look out the window and call out a SAM every now and then. Finally, he said the AC, the aircraft commander, looked over at him and said, Jeff, would you just keep quiet, just focus on the airspeed? He said, you're scaring the other crew members. Oh yeah, just ignored it, it'll go away. At any rate, we talked a little bit about that, and I'll tell you what, the more he talked, the more admiration I had for him. And not only him, but his aircraft commander, and the other members of the crew, and the other bomber crews. I've always felt that. Now I'll take a little bit of a pause here. In 1957, we were stationed at Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. And I remember seeing B-36s at the time flying around the traffic pattern. And all of those things were majestic airplanes. They had 6 receps on them, and that were pusher engines, and then 4 jet engines. They used to say 6 turning and 4 burning, and they were huge airplanes, just magnificent to watch. But they eventually began phasing those out with the B-52s. So I think when I was 11 or 12 years old was the first time I saw a B-52 that came into Ramey, and I always admired them. Just used to love to watch them. So that being said, we'll come back to the near past in 1972. After 11 days of concentrated bombing, I mean, we sent formations of 100, as much as 108, I think, something like that, over those 2 cities, and just really wreaked havoc. Of course, it didn't come without a cost. I think over the 11 days, they lost 13 bombers and several crew members. But eventually the POWs in January were released. And then once they released, they were released. Those that were physically and mentally qualified to requal and to flying, they came to our squadron down in San Antonio to the 560th for that requal program. Shortly thereafter, I don't know if it began in 1973, but very, very soon thereafter, we began holding a POW dining in, a formal dinner for these former POWs. And what an event that was. It still goes on today. Matter of fact, God willing, I'll be attending in April of 2025. But I think I first went to my first POW dining in 1979, maybe. And that was quite an honor just to be there affiliated with these men who had spent so much of their lives in the POW camps. At any rate, when we would have the opportunity to fly with a POW who did not qualify for recertification or requalification in a jet, either because of a physical problem or sometimes the guys just didn't want to do it, we'd offer to take them a ride when they came down for that dining in. And on that Friday, we'd put them in the back seat of a T-38 along with a couple other airplanes. It varied. Sometimes we flew 2 ships. Sometimes we'd fly 4 ships and take them up just for a ride. And then we'd come back, and when they landed, we'd meet them with the fire trucks and hose them down, and then give them a bottle of champagne. When these pilots who flew 100 missions up north came back and landed, that was their 100th mission, they were going home, and that was known as their champagne flight. So they made a big deal out of it when they landed at Tockley or Karat or wherever, Ubon, Udorn, wherever it was they landed. Well, these POWs didn't make it to 100, and when they were captured, the North Vietnamese didn't offer them champagne, so we made sure we made up for it. And God, those days were fun. Then we'd change and meet at the Officers Club about 5:30, and soon thereafter we'd muster out back on the patio of the Officers Club. Now, just beyond the patio, south, is a swimming pool. And boy, does that make a great landmark for flybys. I mean, you can spot that from miles away. You can see the old club, and then you can pick out the swimming pool. And if you line up with that, you're coming right over the Officers Club. And early on in 79, 80, we were still flying a lot of the Vietnam aircraft, F-4s, 105s, A-7s, and so forth. So we would start having a series of aircraft fly over the gathering of the POWs. And as each aircraft would fly over, you'd hear the individual pilots hoot and holler and cheer. It was really magic, just magic, to see those guys looking up and just seeing their faces. So they would fly over. You have the 105 guys, and they, holler and yip and yell and so forth, and the F4 guys and A7 guys. And then the aircraft that came over last and got the most cheers from everyone was the B-52. That thing came over, and they were pushing it up pretty good, and it just hummed as it came overhead. And I was awestruck to stand there and watch that bomber come up, and then to watch these POWs and so forth. Just, they were truly, truly grateful. And it showed. It really did show. It was just magic. And then it would fly off, and we'd go in, and the stories would begin to flow along with the beer and anything else. But it was just a fantastic evening. And every December, I come back to those raids and what those men and women sacrificed to pull it off. And I just, I think of a man like my friend Jeff, and I am so appreciative, and I am so grateful to have known a few of those guys. and just admire and totally respect them. So I dedicate this presentation to those individuals that flew on those missions, that supported those missions, and their families, and I suppose I'll just end by saying, God bless you guys. God bless you. This is Bobo, Bass Gear. Stop.